right.
Give you 1 day.
All right. Mr.
Bring all
Boyd,
your questions to Sweet Farm.
are you ready, Mr. Barkey?
Sure. Is
Sure.
it the appointed hour?
It's the appointed minute.
Oh, well, what do you know?
All right. Well, I'm signing. I'd like to welcome everybody to the October 7th, 2025 public hearing. It's 5:31. Can I get a motion to adjourn? I mean, a motion to.
So
Do that
moved.
right quick, too.
Second.
Second, all in favor, aye? Just see if you're on your toes. Mr. Greg, it's all yours.
All righty. Well, thank you very much. We are here for the final public hearing, we'll say, on the Jones County Pre-Disaster Mitigation Plan public hearing. And so we're going to talk a little bit about a few things that we've been doing with the planning process, how we got to where we are, what we have highlighted in the plan, some of the key facts, features, etc. Then we'll talk about next steps and the review process and all that good stuff. So we shall begin. Here's our brief agenda that matches more or less the agenda that you have on the cover page, and everybody should have a handout of these slides if you would like to follow along as we go through here as well too. So we start off with the entry-level discussion. I'm sure many of you have heard this before, but just to make sure we're all starting from the same space, what is a pre-disaster mitigation plan? Why do we do hazard mitigation planning in Jones County? Well, we recognize that there are hazards in the world around us. Some of those may be things that come from the natural environment. Other things may arise from other organic sources, be that human-made or technological in nature, or any variety of means that can cause disasters, distress, and when that happens, that causes stress on a community, both as we seek to preserve life and property from any of these potential hazards, disasters that might be out there. And so when we talk about pre-disaster planning, that is our effort to help to minimize the impacts that we might see from disasters within Jones County and throughout the city of Gray as well too. So, we do this because every community is required to go through this if you want to be eligible for disaster assistance should a disaster strike. So that's an important process for it. But hopefully this also gives some of the framework actions that you as a community can look at to say this is how we want to be better prepared for the next disaster that might come our way. Obviously we know about the big types of disasters, the things like hurricanes like Helene. Then we also know about, there are tons of times where even strong thunderstorms can bring winds that cause damage to property as well, and sometimes put individuals in grave danger. So how can we address the whole spectrum of potential hazards? Well, we can do that by looking at our physical infrastructure, how we harden that, how we prepare that to make sure that it is ready to withstand what Mother Nature may bring upon it. We look at how we design our building codes, how we do our land use and development planning throughout the community, i.e., for example, are we going to say, let's build in all of our floodplains and have a bunch of properties that are susceptible to flooding, or are we going to say, no, we don't want that type of development in Jones County. We want to try to steer away from floodplains and away from areas that might be of higher risk. And then especially important is how we do communication and outreach, how we make sure that folks know what is available both in terms of resources, information, and that people are prepared to respond to any potential disasters that might occur. So this plan is responsible for identifying these hazards, evaluating the risks, assessing the vulnerabilities that we might see within the community, and then ultimately identifying the projects that are going to help us mitigate those potential disasters. So Throughout the year here, we have had a series of meetings, starting way back in March, when I came to y'all for a first public hearing on this topic. And then we have met with a group of stakeholders that serve as the planning committee, I believe a total of 7 times since then, on a monthly basis. So we've gone into deep detail on a whole variety of hazards, to discuss all of the potential challenges, risks that might be out there, how we're looking to respond to those, identifying those action items and prioritizing them to come back with a draft plan here. And we are now at the point of public hearing number 2. Our next steps include sending out the draft plan document to you all, to our planning committee, to neighboring communities for the opportunity to review, provide any comments, and then it will go to GMA. GMA will have their opportunity to review the plan, again, provide comments, feedback, etc., and then they will submit it to FEMA in their process to review it all and provide comments and then send it back. We would be hopeful that that happens within the next 3 months or so, and that by the time we get here in January, we're ready to come back and adopt it. Just practically speaking, FEMA has been going a little bit slower these past few months with reviews, and you know there may be some things that cause backlogs for them further, at least at this point in time. So it's possible that we will not be back in January. If that is the case, we may just have to file a brief extension on the planning process, but that can be done with no adverse effects to the county. If it's in FEMA's hands, they aren't going to penalize you or hold anything against you in that regard because they're taking extra time to review. So, now we have the whole list of hazards that we talked about here. Many of these were identified at the first public meeting, and then throughout the stakeholder engagement process, we identified a few more of these. Some of these are ones that we might see regularly all the time. Lightning, thunderstorm winds, very, very common. And some of them, fortunately, we have never experienced in Jones County. No dam failures, thankfully. But that doesn't mean that it isn't a potential risk or potential hazard, which is why we do want to make sure to evaluate these. The one that we get as a very common question, and why it's not up there, is, well, where are hurricanes? Well, what are the risks of hurricanes if not flooding, tornadoes, thunderstorm winds, and lightning? So in that nature, we have covered all of the risks of hurricanes through that part of the planning process. The only one that we don't cover is storm surge, and if that happens with a hurricane, we're in a whole lot more trouble than this plan can help us with up here in Jones County. So that's the reason why that is not called out as its own specific hazard in this instance. So with that in mind, we highlight a few of the major changes that have occurred to the plan within the past 5 years. As I mentioned, we are required to do periodic updates to this. It's roughly translates to every 5 years. And if we look at chapters 1 and 2 of the plan, relatively straightforward. The one thing that we did was in the previous plan, you had 2 different sections, one that talked about natural hazards and then one that talked about technological hazards. And they were in separate sections and talked about in very different ways. And we realized that with more and more time that comes to pass, there are things that maybe fit into one category, maybe fit into the other, maybe kind of fit into both, maybe kind of fit into neither, that are absolutely hazards. And so we have sort of shifted to blending those together into one chapter of the plan to talk about hazards more generally. We do talk about things that are tied to the natural environment and things that originate from outside the environment or non-environmental. So, terrorism, for example, is very much a human-caused action outside of the natural environment. But then when we talk about things like dam failure, that's a little bit more complex because there are natural and human-made causes that might tie into that. So that's the biggest change we'll note here about the general organization of the plan and how we're moving forward. We did also add a few additional sections in there to talk about community demographics. And that's tied to the priority that FEMA has set forth to make sure that our planning processes do engage and account for your most vulnerable residents. Certainly, we care about everybody's safety and health and well-being during the event of a disaster, but paying special attention to identify where you might have extra vulnerable populations, such as seniors or the disabled, who may not be able to take care of themselves as easily in these instances. And then we also updated a lot of data. That's going to be a very common thing. We updated a lot of data. Within Chapter 3, which is where we really get into describing and talking about these hazards, you'll see it's kind of small there. Probably should have done 2 slides on that, but you can read it in front of you as well, too. There were several new hazards that we added to the plan, and so we are going to call these out in their full extent there, but don't worry, I'm not going to try to read everything off there. But we did talk about earthquakes as one of the new hazards that was added. We have had a history of earthquakes in Jones County, fortunately none of them being strong enough to cause damage or in many cases even be felt. But because of the potential risk that was there, the state did ask us to make sure we included that in the planning process. And so we do talk about some unique things for earthquakes now, such as making sure that if we have particularly sensitive equipment, generators, things like that, that they are properly braced, that we're not relying on our community lifelines and equipment in places that could be easily damaged by a seismic event, sure, if that were to happen. So that's one of the most notable things that was there, as well as just continuing to make sure that we enforce our standard building codes and a bunch of other things that are tied to structural integrity of buildings within Jones County. Next, we talk about dam failure. We coordinate, this is another new one. We do call out specifically coordination with the Macon Water Authority. That was not one of the things that was previously talked about in the pre-disaster mitigation plan. But as the owner of the biggest dam in the county, figured that that was an important thing to talk about and to make sure that there is planning and discussion related to that, and so that if anything does happen, that we can reflect back on where additional opportunities are, and we can call out that there is a need for assistance with that as a potential hazard. So we talk about evacuation plans as well too there. If that were to be a cause for concern, you'll notice some of these action items are much more specific. Others are a little bit more general. We talk about lots of public information related priorities and action items that are tied to training personnel, and those are things that are very common across all types of hazards. And we'll get to in just a moment slide that talks a little bit about the prioritization, recognizing that there are lots of things we can be doing. Not all of these are high priority items. Not all of these are things we can afford to do right away, or may even be ready to do or want to do immediately, but they might be things that we think about and say, yes, in the long term, that might be a worthwhile thing to pursue. Continuing forward, terrorism was something that was discussed in the plan last time. However, it was primarily discussed from the standpoint of how we might traditionally think of acts of terror, and it did include a focus on school safety as a component of that. The one thing that we noticed in talking with our stakeholders was notably missing was wasn't any discussion of cyber terror, which is something that more and more communities, local governments are dealing with as potential vulnerabilities and as new ways that data and information can be weaponized against our communities. So we did add a whole new goal that was focused on managing and minimizing cyber attacks, any associated issues that might come with that, and strategies that the county has already been doing and will continue to do to avoid that as a potential area of concern. And then lastly, we added one new hazard in coordination with our steering committee, and that was pandemics. There was a little one of those that happened about 5 years ago that we recognize had some major impacts on Jones County, but really everywhere it had major impacts. It was considered a federally declared disaster in all 159 counties of the state. And in fact in the entire nation. And so when we look at how this plan can be used to leverage supplies, materials that may be able to help respond to future mass outbreaks of critical illnesses or diseases in the future, that we can leverage this plan as a way to get the resources that might be necessary to fight against that, and hopefully find ways that we continue to message ways of practicing good hygiene and all of that good stuff that will hopefully help to keep us safe from future disasters. Obviously, our hope is, and actually that's not strong enough, our prayer is that none of these happen. But we do want to make sure that we at least acknowledge that and are prepared for it. And with that, that gets us to a few of the highest priority action items. Many of these are carryovers from the previous plan, but just wanted to call them out particularly and with an area of focus. This includes discussion of how we educate staff on the incident command procedures that would be required in case of an emergency, how we make sure to conduct drills where possible, to coordinate those response efforts and practice before we get to the worst case scenario. Generators continues to be a huge area of focus, that we inventory them, we identify what they are, where they need to be at, and that we have access to them and they can work in a variety of places, especially at any facilities that are considered essential or critical. We do talk about a local anti-terrorism advisory committee, which was a recommendation from the previous plan as well too. Continuing lockdown drills with the schools and in participation with them. Making sure that, again, that we have necessary equipment, supplies, especially to respond to terrorism, that we maintain and update any security equipment, that we expand fire protection throughout the community, maintaining essential contacts for all key stakeholders, working on evacuation plans as needed, and creating digital backups of critical documents, information that may be necessary, again, so that in case of any disasters, we can continue to be a resilient governmental operation. We can stay powered as much as possible and functional to the greatest extent feasible, recognizing that the people of Jones County and those who might come into the community are going to be relying on your staff to be able to meet their needs and help keep them safe at the times where they might be the most vulnerable. So with that, provides the brief overview. When we have a few moments, we can take any public comments from either the commission or from members of the public, if there are any, or questions about this plan at this time.
Greg, who controls the threshold requirement for considering a disaster? So from what I understand, I know since Mother's Day 2008, I don't think it's changed. I think it's like 19 million statewide, but that's the same GMA and FEMA, right?
Yeah, so that is that decision happens at the GMA and FEMA level. So above and beyond anything we can control or manage here.
So if we're adding potential disaster opportunities, I'll call it, how is and I know you don't, this is probably a rhetorical question because I know you don't know the answer, but how are we maintaining the same $19 million threshold for 20 years if the price of everything is going up, the price to rebuild is going up, and there's more things getting added to the list to be considered a natural disaster, but yet the pay is the same? That makes no sense.
Yeah. That's a great question.
About right.
That's a great question to talk to your friends and representatives in DC about. But yes, I mean, and I'll say a lot of the items that we are asked or strongly encouraged, very strongly encouraged to consider, come directly from GMA. They say like, yeah, like you need to talk about earthquakes. Yes, you have not had one that has been strong enough to cause any sort of damage, but you still need to talk about it. So, you know, there are a lot of decisions that happen up at those levels, but I think asking about the reimbursement process, how communities can be compensated and made whole, is a essential part of this. That's why we have to do this plan, is because in theory it should be able to help make communities whole. So yes, talk to your friends that you know up at those higher levels of decision making.
Because we've had situations where with the river running down one border of our county, everybody along the river is prone to flood. And so we see floods, lightning, tornadoes, wind damage, a lot more than we're going to see earthquakes and cyber attacks and terrorism in Jones County. So if the threshold is the same and you have a wind that comes through and hits only a certain sector of the county, they don't qualify for any relief unless the whole county or the whole state gets to 19 million. And we've seen it several times where it keeps getting pushed back from, even from our state to GMA, either one, to your insurance company, your homeowner's insurance company. And they're gonna try to say, well, it's a natural disaster, it's not our problem, it didn't cover that. So, the homeowner's just holding the bag.
Yeah.
Yep.
Definitely understand the frustrations.
Any other questions from the board? Any questions from the audience?
All right, so I apologize, this is the first meeting I've been to that you've been doing this, so, but just for a lot of this, is there a place that we can see the current plan and the new plan in draft form that we publicly can access?
Yeah, so the answer for the draft plan, certainly we will send it out to the full list of steering committee members. And if y'all would like to post that on the county website, I think that would be a way of making it accessible. The old plan may also be on the county website. I'm not positive. That's certainly something we can check into. It is a very, very, very large document, about like 500 pages or so in total. We should be able to get it up there if it is not currently.
We put a link on our website, and that way they can just access it and print
Yeah.
it if they want.
Yeah.
And anybody in here that wants to keep up with the county's functions and what's going on, if you'll call up here and ask for Ms. Shannon, she can get you added to our email list. So you get emails, everything that's taking place in the county. And that's a great way to, we got Facebook and our website, but getting it directly from us, having your email address, that way you can keep up with us. Any other questions? Anything else you need from us?
Yes, I have one last slide here. So for those of you who have been here for this meeting, and if you came in right after I started talking, please still raise your hand, let me know, and fill this out. But if you just came in, no need to worry about it. But the county is responsible for an in-kind match as part of this project, and so your willingness to be here and listen to me talk it is worth money to the federal government, because I'm that boring. No. But they do appreciate your time. If you are a volunteer in the audience, we do ask that you put 1 hour of your time here, because it did take you time to travel here. And at the rate of $33.49 per hour. I wish that I got paid that much to listen to me speak, but I probably would deserve more for listening to me. So, but thank you. If you wouldn't mind, please putting that there, raising your hand, and I will collect any of those forms so that we can do that and help make sure that the county does not have to come out of pocket for this plan. So, because everything else is grant funded. And then lastly, there's contact information if you have any. So, okay.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
It's always a great job.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
We got 5 minutes. Yep. Stretch my leg.